We're ready to start. Mary Sexton, would you please wave so Billy will know where you're at so he can go have a seat?
I want 1,000 strawberries. I don't need it.
Everyone has been through the line, and as we'll go, everyone has been through the line, and we'll go ahead and start this evening. If you have not had dessert yet, please feel free to go back and get dessert or get something else to eat. That was very delicious. Daniel, thank you very much. Did he hear me back there? Okay, thank you. We'd like to recognize the members of the Howell County United Federation of Republican Women. Those of you that are here tonight, would you please stand? Thank you for all you do, and thank you, ladies. There were several of the ladies that was here this afternoon decorating, and thank you very much. At this time, we would like to introduce Mike Hutchings. Mike is the prosecuting attorney and also the county committee treasurer. And Mike will come and introduce our guest.
So if I call your name, if you don't mind to stand up so everybody else can see you, so that those of us that don't know you can recognize who you are. And so I'm going to start off with somebody I usually say for the very end. I'm going to put Wendell Bailey and Jane up front. Wendell Bailey is our former U.S. Congressman and State Treasurer. Wendell Bailey.
Thank you.
Our presiding judge, Stephen Prevett, and his wife, Alice. Judge Donna Anthony. Judge David Ray. Our presiding commissioner, Mark Collins. Our southern commissioner, Billy Sexton, and his wife, Mary. Our county clerk, Kelly Wagner. Our county collector, Dennis Van Alman, and his wife, Judy. Of course, Daniel Franks, our county assessor, is probably back preparing for fixing his head. Recorder of Deeds, Jeff Brazier, and his wife, Dawn. Treasurer, Nancy Friends. Sheriff, Brent Campbell. Public Administrator John Pruitt and his wife Rebecca. And our surveyor Ralph Riggs. I'd also like to recognize those people that are on the Howell County Republican Committee. If we have some of those people, if you would please stand up as well.
Thank you, Mike. We'd like to introduce some of our elected officials to come and speak to us. And we're going to ask these individuals to limit their comments to about 5 minutes. If folks get talking long, Mary, would you nudge Billy? And Billy, would you start off with your auctioneer chant, and we'll get that taken care of. First of all, we would like to introduce State Representative Travis Smith, representing the District 155. Travis is no stranger to us fans from Howell.
Time to wing it.
What you do in Jeff City, you tap on the mic before you get started, so it's on there. One of the things that I've really enjoyed about being a state representative is taking care of people back home. 95% of what my job is when people have trouble with Department of Revenue, get their plates, unemployment. It's not what you think about when you see on TV about these great big debates. As a matter of fact, the only time you ever have a lot of debates are when the Democrats are talking, and that's when everybody leaves the chamber. And it's funny, I have pictures of somebody standing there talking to the speaker's dais, and the speaker's sitting down. There's nobody even listening to him and stuff too. But we do get a lot of good things done for the people back home. And if you ever have any problem with on a local, county, state, federal, you give us a call. And I really want to say something about Senator Esslinger has been a big help. Megan Nicky's a big help. Will Wheeler and Sean Rhodes has really helped me by introducing me some good folks up there. We started off about 4,000 years ago with 10 really good laws, and we couldn't follow those. So we just kept adding on and adding on and adding on. My MO is not about trying to pass a bunch of bills. What we need more than anything else in Southwest Missouri is access to broadband. Broadband is now a utility. It's no longer something that we just have to have. If there was one positive thing that came out of COVID, is we found out a lot of us can do our work from home. And not only can we do our work from home, we can do work with anybody all over the world. But you have to have that access. All summer long, we sat on a subcommittee talking about broadband. There are two gentlemen from the University of Missouri that made a really good point. From the time a child is born till that time that child graduates high school, the local, county, state, and federal government have invested about $400,000 into each one of those students. So for every 10 kids we lose, we're losing about $4 million of tax investment. Our number one export right now in Southwest Missouri is our young people. We cannot afford to let that happen anymore. We have to have people that have access to it. And as Republicans, a lot of times we talk about free market, free market, free market. In my district over in Ozark and Douglas County, there is no free market because there are no people. And the companies are not going to come in there because they cannot make a profit. So what we've got to do and our focus on is doing this through the electric cooperatives. Those co-ops came here in the 20s and 30s to provide electricity. And they've done a magnificent job. There is no place in any county in the state of Missouri where people can't get electricity if they want to. They have the infrastructure to do it. All the lines are there, and people are willing to get put in. They just need a little bit of push, and they hear from things. And one of the things that we talk about a lot, how many people have got, who's on rural electric in here? Raise your hand if you're, how many people have got a dividend from rural electric? Raise your hand, okay? I asked them, I said, why don't you ask your customers whether or not they'd rather have good internet or dividend? And the answer was, well, that's in our bylaws. And I said, you're the board. You have the ability to make that change if you want to. So please, anytime if you talk to someone from a rural co-op, Howell, Oregon is doing an excellent job because they've got some private and public partnerships going on with Current Electric, so they're going to provide it out here. And White River is working on providing it over in the southwest part of Missouri. And so that's my biggest goal, is by the time I'm done to make sure that we have broadband in our homes in Ozark, Howell County, Douglas County, and Taney County. And I appreciate your time, and I want to emphasize, if you need any help with anything in Jefferson City, all you have to do is call our office. Right now, it doesn't matter where you are. There's not a shortage of workers. There's just a shortage of people willing to work. And in Jefferson City, the people who are working at the Capitol are working very hard, but they have caseloads this big. So a lot of times what we'll do is we will just walk over to that office and say, can you help me with this? And a lot of times they will. And so that's my job. I love doing this job. There's not a day that goes by where I serve in that Capitol. I don't feel blessed by God to be up there. And I just want to tell you how much I appreciate serving in the state of Missouri. And God bless you all. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Travis. Representative David Evans and his wife Sandy is not with us this evening. They're actually attending their son Matthew's graduation from Air Force Basic Training. He's graduating top 10% of his class with honors. He will be serving as a cryptolinguist. And all of us that have watched Matthew grow up in the community, we're proud of this fine young man, and we wish him the very best and pray for God's guidance and protection as he serves our nation. A good friend of David Evans, State Representative John Black from District 137, is here this evening to represent David. And John, please come.
Thank you, Dennis. It's a privilege to be here to represent Judge Evans. I'm sure you all can excuse him. He sends his regrets, but Matthew Paul Evans graduated, as Dennis said, in the top 10% of his class, actually #1 in his flight. He will serve as a cryptolinguist. He already speaks Chinese, I understand. The first thing he will learn to do is speak Russian. So I'm not sure what a cryptolinguist does, but I'm pretty sure it's sometimes being in dangerous areas where he's trying to listen to transmissions of people speaking one of those two languages. So we certainly wish him the best. We know he'll do the job well since we know his dad, and we are happy, very happy, for David and Sandy as they are there to attend that graduation. I did not know Judge Evans. I practiced law in Springfield for 35 years before I ran for office, and we were elected at the same time. It was a pleasure to meet him, but I got to meet him better when we were assigned our seats in the House, and he sat next to a lady named Carla Esslinger, and I sat behind them. And so we got to know each other well as we discussed legislation that went through, and sometimes goofed off a little bit, but telling each other jokes or making comments. And you kind of, so I got to meet David and Carla in that fashion. It kind of makes you wonder sometimes if there's not someone behind you with the things that happen in your life, doesn't it? It's certainly been a blessing for me to get to know Representative Evans and Senator Esslinger. I want to tell you a little bit about David while I have the chance. As you all know, David is an accomplished lawyer and judge. He's a sophomore. He served 4 terms in the House. So we are sophomores. We're in our 2nd term. And there are lawyers who are juniors and seniors, but David is the chair of the House Judiciary Committee. That's an example of the respect he has. No one in my class, and the senator can tell you it was the same when she was over here in the lower assembly, no one is more respected. No one's advice is sought out more than Judge Evans. From leadership, from the speaker to the floor leader to all the members of the House who might have a question about legislation, how it would affect other laws that are on the books now. You all know David well, I'm sure. He's a wonderful person, and you are very, very privileged to have David Evans as your representative, and I'm privileged to speak for him tonight. Nice to see you all. Thank you.
Representative Black, thank you for coming to Howell County. Next, we'd like to introduce our state senator, Carla Esslinger, senator from the 33rd District. Carla?
All right. Well, I think I'll have to pull this down just a hair. Get this down here. Oh goodness, I'll be able to. Hello. How are you all tonight? Things going well? Good food. My goodness, I knew he was a great county official, but I had no idea the man could cook. This is great. I think I've been to a veterans picnic where he also catered and had dinner there. It was just wonderful then and wonderful tonight. You know, I have two jobs tonight. One, I want to share just a little bit about the work that I'm doing up in Jefferson City. And then also, I need to share a little bit from our Lieutenant Governor, Mike Kehoe. I think I'll start with the message from Lieutenant Governor Mike Kehoe. I invited our Lieutenant Governor to come visit with us for Lincoln Days. And he was planning to be here and is looking very much forward to meeting all of you. And then, as you all know, we had a tragedy. We had a tragedy where we lost several of our police officers. And tonight, our Lieutenant Governor is where he should be. And his office sent to me this morning this message to you, and I'd like to read it to you now. Before I start, can you all hear me back there okay? Great, thank you. Thank you for allowing me a moment to speak on Lieutenant Kehoe's behalf. First and foremost, he extends his apologies that he cannot be here. His absence is not by choice, but rather because he is representing the state of Missouri at the funeral of the second Joplin police officer killed last week in the line of duty. Mike brings his background as a small business owner and our shared traditional, conservative, Christian values to the office of Lieutenant Governor. Mike understands that relationships are important and has demonstrated the ability to govern on behalf of Missourians. And I want you all to know that his office is right down the street from mine. I mean, 2 doors down. And the other 2 doors on the other side is the governor, so I'm in pretty good company. The Lieutenant Governor is very focused on economic development, recognizing that the best way to improve the future of the state is to grow opportunities for small businesses, to operate and excel. And he has more than doubled the membership of Buy Missouri, which focuses on Missouri manufacturers during his time in office. In addition to his efforts in economic development, Mike is actively involved with issues to veterans, seniors, and ag. He takes a great deal of pride having the privilege of advocating for our nation's heroes, and those who experience and persistence have laid the foundation for the state we have today. When not in Jefferson City or on the campaign trail, you'll most likely find Mike on his farm in Phelps in Pulaski County. Mike and Claudia are first generation self-taught farmers. Now you can imagine what that looks like, right? First generation self-taught farmers. That I always hear people, when I talk about we're 4th generation on our farm, and sometimes it's humorous when Dave and I try to get out there and do some things. I just can't imagine what first generation looks like, but proud of it. And they do have a successful cow and calf operation. Howell County knows Mike Kehoe from long before politics, and he is very grateful for your friendship and your support. And that's your message from our Lieutenant Governor, Mike Kehoe. I know we don't have much time, and I know that we got started just a little bit late, so I won't drone on and on and on, even though I do have a tendency to do that. I won't do it today. But I would like to bring your attention, here's a school person coming out. Would you look on your table? There's a piece of paper that looks like this. And I'll bring your attention to that. And basically, it just kind of gives you a snapshot of some of the work that I've been doing since you have sent me there to do the work for you. There are 3 bills that I'm working on currently. The first one is protecting religious liberty from vaccinations, forced vaccinations. Woo! What I'm doing is protecting your right as a citizen of our state to have that choice. You shouldn't lose your job. You shouldn't be denied schooling. None of those things should apply. And I'm doing everything I can with the help, I want you to know, of Representative David Evans, Representative John Black, and Representative Travis Smith. We're working together to make sure that nonsense, frankly, will stop. I'm also expanding some work, which, by the way, your Congressman, Jason Smith, initiated back in the day when he was in the House.
Great. The Lord's
Pardon me?
work. You're doing the Lord's work.
Anyway, we all know what the Castle Doctrine is, where you were able to protect your freedom, protect your property, protect your family. And so I have a piece of legislation that will provide you the opportunity as business owners and at the place where you work to also have the ability to protect yourself there. So that's the little piece of legislation that we're doing, that's Senate Bill 1134. And then here's something that's near and dear to my heart. I don't know if you guys remember when President Trump did a lot of work on the 1776 Commission. And the 1776 Commission was some work where we looked to see what it is that we need to do to offset some of these negative pieces such as critical race theory. Some of the things that's happening in our public schools that we do not want to see. So we brought together a group of people and they put together a commission, a report. And I read that report and the darn thing made so much sense. And so what I have here is a piece of legislation that provides our children an opportunity for their teachers to be trained on what it is to be an American, what it is to be a citizen of this great United States. So what this is that we now teach civics. Kids understand the 3 branches of government. They understand how a bill becomes a law. But I don't think they understand the unique opportunity and value and just the pure love of our country. And we need to teach our children patriotism. I encourage you all to read the Commission on the 1776, and I want you guys to help champion this. We constantly push down things into our schools, content-wise. This gives us an opportunity for our children to understand what it is to be of service. It also gives us an opportunity when we ask our children, I mean, goodness, just like David Evans' son, to go fight and give their lives. What is it about, right? What are those freedoms? What are those things that we want to protect and love? So those are my 3 big pieces of legislation, plus some others. In fact, my chief of staff, which I want to introduce to you, standing up behind the room, his name is Will Wheeler. Will Wheeler joined me in January, and I can tell you he has finally said, Carla, we have a lot going on, but slow down. But he doesn't know me very well, but he'll get used to it. But I also want to share with you just a few things that we're doing as a Senate. I want you to know that in our supplemental budget, we zeroed out any dollars for Planned Parenthood and their affiliates. I want you to know that we also revoked, this actually came about in, I have to tell you, we have a joint committee last session that was looking at how do we finally get Planned Parenthood out of Missouri? How do we finally, truly stop all abortions in our state? And we have a recommendation that's Senate Bill 779. And this is the only way that we're going to do it for sure, and that is that Mo Health gives them the ability to revoke any contract which has any provider that has committed unethical behavior, such as abortion services. We have to play by the rules. We can't just zero them out. We have to make sure that Medicaid is not something they can apply for, and that's the bottom line. Also, as Travis Smith talked about, we know broadband is important. My goodness gracious, we actually have $400 million more than we ever had to that. We also have co-ops that are working very hard to get these things done. They're working directly with their commissioners, and I know they've met with ours. We have an opportunity in our state to be able to make a difference right now for every person who wants to move here. We have 2 brand new people here from California. I've lost them. There they are. Okay, 2 people from California. I bet the first thing they asked when they moved here was, do you have internet? Was that? Nope. Okay, never mind. You should answer. Sorry. Never mind. But hey, I want you to know that there's going to be some great things come down the pike. We're doing what's right for Missouri. We're doing what's right for Howell County and West Plains. And I'll stop with just a little bit before you get to visit with your congressman. We're working on a map. We're working on a congressional map. And this map has to reflect, or has to make sure, that Howell County, West Plains, that our congressman's Main Street looks like West Plains. So he will know and understand what we value and hold dear and be able to represent us well. I will continue to fight to make sure that Howell County, that West Plains, does not have a congressman from Blue Springs and Jackson County. Thank you so much for all you do. Thank you for
Thank you, Carla. Jason Jason Smith is a 7th generation Missourian, a citizen legislator, and champion for the rights and values of rural Missouri. Jason was raised in Salem, Missouri, where he still owns the same family farm that was started by his great-grandfather. He attended Salem High School, where he was active in FFA. Jason earned degrees in agricultural economics and business administration at the University of Missouri-Columbia. After receiving degrees from both programs in 3 years, he attended law school in Oklahoma City University before returning home to serve his community. Back home in Missouri, Jason began running the family farm and practicing law. Jason was elected to the Missouri General Assembly in a special election in 2005. In the General Assembly, his colleagues selected him to serve in leadership, first as Majority Whip, then as Speaker Pro Tem, one of the youngest in Missouri's history. During a special election in June 2013, Jason was elected to represent Missouri's 8th Congressional District in the United States House of Representatives. As a member of the 117th Congress, Jason served as the Republican leader of the Budget Committee and the Ways and Means Committee. In Washington, Jason has made a name for himself as a strong defender of rural Missouri and all of rural America. He's committed to fighting intrusive governmental regulations, increasing markets for farmers and ranchers, and protecting his constituents' rural way of life. In 2021, he was rated as the top conservative in the Missouri delegation by the American Conservative Union. He's a life member of the National Rifle Association, pro-life, and supports traditional values. Ladies and gentlemen, our Congressman, Jason Smith.
I feel trapped back there, but maybe I'll just stand over to the side. Thank you, Dennis. We are so grateful in Howell County for the service of Dennis, right? Yes. Dennis, you have served this county for so long, and you have been a friend since before I was ever elected to Congress, and I appreciate the service that you've done here, and I appreciate your friendship, and we know you're not done. We know you're not done. But let me tell you, I first want to say thank you. Thank you so much for sending Carla to be in the Missouri State Senate, because I've dealt with some senators up there lately over redistricting, and there is not a stronger fighter for Howell County, for Ozark, Douglas, the counties in our congressional district, and so proud of her. And expanding the Castle Doctrine, which I'm very proud of. I wish we could have done that 10, 15 years ago, and she's doing it now. And let me tell you, we have never had a female leader of the Missouri State Senate, but we quite possibly could have it with Carla. We really could. You all don't realize how fortunate we are to have someone with her leadership, her dedication, and her grit. There's no question that she has it, and when she believes in something, she ain't backing down. And that's what I want out of the state senators that's in our congressional district, and we have that in every one of our state senators, and I'm so thankful and proud of it. But we have some really good state reps as well. Travis Smith, I know you're here, and we also have my former employee, Benny Cook, who represents a portion of Howell County. He's on a trip somewhere, but he needed to take his wife somewhere. Judge Evans, what Representative Black said, I totally agree with all of it. A true statesman and someone who works so hard for this region and for the people that sent him up there. And Representative Darrell Atchison, which is going to have a portion of this county. I don't know if he's here tonight. I haven't seen him, but he lives all the way over in like Wayne County. but he's going to have one of the largest state rep districts in the state of Missouri, but he will represent this area in a very, very fine fashion. Folks, it's been crazy. I apologize. This is how I dress when I travel on the planes. And my plane was delayed, and I landed at 3 o'clock in St. Louis, and we came straight here. Didn't bother to change, but this is Jason Smith. This is what I enjoy, and this is how I dress. So just a hillbilly from Dent County, and I'm proud of it. But I will say that this week has been quite a tough week for our congressional district. You know, Carla was talking about the second of 2 officers that was killed in Joplin. We had an officer killed in Bonne Terre on Wednesday night. And that's unacceptable. This shouldn't happen. We had another officer that was wounded in Bonne Terre in our congressional district, a small community. And on my way here, I called the police chief, and it's tough. It's tough. We shouldn't have this criminal activity that we have, especially in rural Missouri. And then yesterday morning, we had an awful car accident in Charleston. 6 people lost their lives and over 30 cars in a pileup. So it's been a tough time. But you know what? We are a community of grit. And we stand together, and so I just ask that you pray for our brothers and sisters that's in our congressional district on the other side. We also have a lot of things going on across this world. This week, we, all the members of Congress sat in a speech from the president of Ukraine. And I'll tell you, that was a moving speech and a video that he showed us that I will never forget, seeing pregnant women dead on stretchers because they had just been bombed by Putin soldiers. We're living in a very, very dangerous time. An extremely dangerous time. And the leadership of that president in Ukraine, that's how leaders should be. I wish our president was 180th of that when it came to leadership. Folks, this would never have happened under a Donald Trump presidency. I don't care what anyone says. Putin would have never invaded another country like that with Donald Trump. It's because we're viewed on the world stage as weak because what happened in Afghanistan. We pulled out of Afghanistan with American soldiers still there, and over $80 billion worth of military equipment, making the Taliban the 3rd most equipped military in the world behind the US and China. If you're not going to pull out that equipment, blow it up. And it's just when you have poor leadership. Seriously, I think our country would not have nearly as many crises as what we have today if Joe Biden would have never left the basement for the last 13 months. And I'm not kidding. We've had one crisis after another. Started his very first week in office. His very first week, the executive orders that he did started everything. And I want to remind you, that first week he fired 9,000 hard-working Americans to eliminate the Keystone XL pipeline. On that same day, he eliminated new oil drilling leases on federal land. In 2020, we were completely energy independent. We were exporting for the first time in 50 years oil and natural gas out of the United States. That was in 2020, the last year of the Trump presidency. By the stroke of the pen, Joe Biden created the crisis that we're facing today. And it's multiple crises. It's the fuel pump, the energy crisis that you're all experiencing. Let me tell you something. 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, I was flying back to Missouri, and I was trying to think. I remember taking a picture at the gas prices at a local Casey's in our congressional district. It was not too far from here, actually. And it was 97 cents. And I remember whenever I saw that, I was like, this reminds me of when I was in high school. And I'm like, 97 cents. And so I took the picture. And you know, on your iPhone, it tells you when you take the picture. And I'm like, when was that? So I was going through, 2-hour flights from DC to Missouri. You get to read and do a lot of stuff. And so I went through my phone. It was April 24th, 2020. Less than 2 years ago, it was the last year of the Trump presidency, 97 cents gas in this congressional district. You ain't finding it now. And it's because of those policies of Joe Biden that he did by executive order, by just the stroke of the pen. And Congress could have reversed it, but Congress is controlled by Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. We are in one-party control in Washington, D.C. by the Democrat Party, and we lose almost every day. Because those Democrats, they vote together down the board, and they stick together. Think about this. If the Keystone XL pipeline was still open, we'd be bringing in over 820,000 barrels of oil a day from our friends to the north in Canada. But instead, Joe Biden decided that he would rather purchase 620+ thousand barrels of oil a day from Putin. Think about that. Basically funding Russia's aggression. So when I say that Joe Biden, by the stroke of the pen, created these crises, he's funding that war. Because he didn't have to do that, and he shouldn't have done that. But that's in fact what he did, just line by line when you talk about it. And folks, I'm the Republican leader of the House Budget Committee. I decided 13 months ago that I wanted to be the Republican leader of the House Budget Committee because I felt like that our party had lost its way in fiscal accountability and spending. Oh my word. Last year alone, Nancy Pelosi, on top of just keeping the lights on, spent more than $7.5 trillion on top of just keeping the lights on. No one knows what $1 trillion is because there's not one trillionaire in this world. To comprehend how much $1 trillion is, think about this. If you would spend $1 million, we'd all love to spend $1 million, right? We'd love to have $1 million to spend $1 million. But if you spent $1 million every day since Jesus Christ was born, over 2,000 years ago, you would still only spend 3/4 of $1 trillion. Think about that. That's how much $1 trillion is. Back in March 11th, a year ago Friday, the $2 trillion reconciliation bill was passed and signed into law by Joe Biden. And we warned them, if you pass this, you're going to fuel the fire of inflation. Democrat economist Larry Summers, who worked for Obama, said, if you pass this $2 trillion bill, you will fuel inflation. And I argued with them on the House floor. Every chairman of the House countered my arguments, and they said, the American people want this. This bill will stop COVID. You spend the $2 trillion and this bill will stop COVID. But you know what? Less than 9% of that $2 trillion bill actually even went towards healthcare spending and COVID. And COVID's not gone, folks. You just have to learn to live with it. You don't shut down the world, you live with it. Finally, they've learned that because the president was given a State of the Union, so COVID was over. That's literally, first time in my life, it's this Congress that I didn't have to wear a mask is because Joe Biden came to the House and they didn't want it for the optics. That's the truth. If I didn't wear a mask on the House floor, I was fined $3,000 by Nancy Pelosi. You talk about Democrats loving command and control over your lives, they do it all the time. But this $2 trillion spending bill, less than 9% went towards health care. The other 91% went towards crazy stuff. And we've been exposing it every week. I send out this email called "What Would You Cut?" as the budget committee, because the president said, "What would you cut of this $2 trillion? I'd cut all $2 trillion. But I've been going line by line once we uncover every aspect of corruption. $17 million was in this bill to build a golf course in Palm Beach, Florida. $4 million to build a parking lot at a beach in South Carolina. Millions of dollars for luxury apartments in Connecticut. $2 million to plant trees in Syracuse, New York. $1,400 stimulus checks to Japanese citizens who live in Japan, not the U.S. $1,400 stimulus checks to over 300,000 prisoners, including the Boston Marathon bomber. We've been exposing it line by line what is in this $2 trillion bill. And they wonder why last week inflation hit 7.9%, the highest inflation since 1981. And you know their answer to solve that? Two things. Spend $5 trillion more dollars, and that will solve inflation, or drive an electric car. Think about this. Less than 3% of America drives electric cars. Much less than that drives electric cars in southeast and south central Missouri. But you want to know what they also want to do? They want you to buy that electric car and the electric tractor, but they want to ban coal power. They are closing one of 3 coal power plants we have in our congressional district in Festus, Missouri, south of Festus. 72% of all the electric generated in our congressional district comes from coal power. So this administration wants to eliminate 72% of our electric so we can all drive electric cars. Guess what? You're going to be on the side of the road because you won't have a charge. It does not make sense of the people that I'm working with, but this is Biden's America with one-party rule of the Democrat Party. It's awful, folks. It's terrible. I am doing everything I can to push back against this craziness. Let me tell you, as the Republican leader of the Budget Committee, I saw the worst piece of legislation I've ever seen in my life. My entire life, and that's saying something. When I served in the State House and the U.S. House, and it was what he called the Build Back Better bill. I call it the Build Back Broke bill. He said it was a $3 trillion spending bill. They ultimately made some changes in the House of Representatives and unfortunately passed it out in the House of Representatives, and they tried to say it was a $1.7 trillion bill. I kept saying all along with my committee staff on the Budget Committee, we said it's a $5 trillion spending bill. It's the largest tax increase in the history of the United States, and it's the largest spending bill in the history of the United States, and it added more debt in one single piece of legislation than any piece of legislation in the history of the United States, when we're already at $30 trillion. But they're like, no, it's $1.7 trillion, but then Joe Biden says it costs $0. The same guy who said he would never do a vaccine mandate also said this $5 trillion bill cost $0. Well, folks, it ultimately passed the House, and I could not sleep at night just thinking of how can we stop this. And so ever since July, I paid attention to what every senator was saying. And Senator Manchin was very clear. He said from July on that he would not support another spending bill that was more than $1.5 trillion with no budget gimmicks over a 10-year window. And the bill that passed out of the House had 17 different budget gimmicks that we came up with, where they would say this program would last for a year and then it would phase out, but in fact they wanted it to be permanent. And even the White House said all programs would be permanent. So I called my counterpart from the Budget Committee over on the Senate side, Senator Lindsey Graham, you know him? My other counterpart is Bernie Sanders. Bernie doesn't like me much, but that's all right. Anyhow, I called Senator Graham and I asked him, I was like, will you join me in doing an official request from the Congressional Budget Office, asking for a score of the bill that passed out of the House of Representatives that they said that was $1.7 trillion and scored, according to no budget gimmicks and complete permanency over 10 years, exactly what Senator Manchin said that he would not support. We wanted to show him what the true numbers was on that bill. Senator Graham said, it's a brilliant idea, let's do it. We submitted the request, 2 weeks went by, and crickets from the director of the CBO. Well, I found the director of the CBO. We had a very long conversation, and he ultimately decided it was in his best interest to do that score. And it came back on a score on a Thursday, and that score of that bill was $5.1 trillion. So we were wrong. We said it's $5 trillion. It's 5.1. $5.1 trillion. We walked that over to Senator Manchin. 3 days later, Senator Manchin issues an official press release and citing in that official press release why he will not support the Build Back Broke. He called it the Build Back Better because of the CBO score that we hand-delivered to him. Folks, even when you're in the minority, you got to find every tool you possibly can. And even though it passed the House of Representatives, I wanted to make sure we killed the worst piece of legislation I've ever seen in my life that would have transformed this country. And you talk about spending another $5 trillion on top of the $2 trillion, inflation would be in the 20s and 30% if that would pass. And so we're grateful that it has not passed so far. And now, let me tell you, at the State of the Union, I just knew he was going to try to slip it back up in the name of COVID or something. And so we got to keep watching the next 9 months. And I'm telling you folks, we have to be aggressive and strong and fight like we've never fought before. I have been recruiting candidates all over this country to make sure that we have the best players on the field, because we got to win this election. We have to fire Speaker Pelosi, and we have to fire Chuck Schumer.
Amen.
Let me tell you. Yeah. I will tell you, if you come to my office in Washington, D.C., I have this letter on my wall framed, and it's from Speaker Pelosi. Can you believe that? A letter from, it's not a love letter, by the way. But this letter is on my wall, and I got it 3 years ago. And 3 years ago is whenever the Republicans lost the majority in the House of Representatives. At that time, I was the number 5th in House leadership. I was the conference secretary. And it was a letter from Speaker Pelosi kicking me out of my office in the Capitol. And whenever we got it, my team was like, let's shred that. I was like, let's frame that so that we can look at it every day and remember what happened and how we did things wrong and how we can turn this country back. And so I look at it every day when I'm in Washington, D.C. And I make my team look at it, because that letter, I've always said that she kicked me out of my office, but I'm going to have the opportunity to kick her out of her office. And it's this November, folks. And it's going to take every one of us. And when we win back the House, when we win back the Senate, we can start stopping what's going on from this White House. And then we can help. Let me tell you, I've sent over 40 letters to this administration trying to have oversight of these agencies. And hopefully hopefully if I have the opportunity to become chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, that committee has jurisdiction over the IRS. And you talk about someone who wants to have some oversight over the IRS, you're looking at them. Because the IRS is the most feared agency. And the stuff that they've been trying to do, where if you spend $600 in or out of your bank account, they want to hire 87,000 auditors to come after you? If we win the majority, that ain't happening underneath my watch, I can tell you that. And it is such a real opportunity that if we do it right, we can have that checks and balances, and we can pave the way for 2 years later. We can win back the White House in 2024. And if we have the House, the Senate, and the White House, I think we've learned from the mistakes that we know what to do and how to get along and try to make sure we pull back all of this garbage that's we've been dealing with. Folks, it's a complete honor to be your member of Congress. I'm just a country boy from Salem, but I can tell you I can fight with the best of them in Washington, D.C. And when it comes to protecting my friends and family back home, and that's the Zizzers here in Howell County. That's the Willow Springs Bears. You all are my friends, you are my neighbors, and you will be in our congressional district. If I have to do whatever I can, you will be in our congressional district. But you can always count on us fighting every second of the day for our way of life in Washington, D.C. to make sure that our freedoms are there. It's a tough time right now, whether it's the immigration crisis. Let me tell you one other thing. Okay, sorry, and then I'll stop. But this happened this week. This is crazy. We're having a border crisis, by the way, in case you haven't seen that. You know, that's exactly, well, that's good. I was going to ask, is she a Republican from California? So that's good.
I'm from Arizona, sorry.
But I've been to the border several times in the last couple years. More than 2 million people have crossed the border since Joe Biden's been president illegally. More than 2 million. When I went to the border back just a few months ago, it was something like I've never seen. For one, you see these huge gaps in the wall where part of the border wall's part of the border wall's done, big portions not done, and you just see the metal just laying there. And by the stroke of the pen, by the executive order, Joe Biden halted the border wall. Even though the money was appropriated by Congress to build it. In a bipartisan fashion, in fact. Well, I'm standing at the border wall. This is right outside of Yuma, Arizona, and the Yuma District Station. And there was this group of 5 people that was, actually it was a group of 6, but a group of 5 that started coming across the open gap. And I was standing with a border patrol officer, and there was a guy on the other side that was kind of pushing them and telling them what to do. Well, this group of 5 was a family that came to the Border Patrol and just surrendered while we were there. And they weren't from Mexico. They weren't from any country in South America. So why were they coming across the southern border? They were from Romania in Europe. And they were dressed better than a lot of folks in our congressional district. And they all had these plastic wristbands on. And it was a mom and several of their kids. It was 2 moms and 3 kids, actually. And the Border Patrol officer told me, you know what these wristbands are? They get this from the criminal cartel, the Mexican cartel. Because they pay the cartel $10,000 roughly a piece to cross the southern border. And the criminal Mexican cartel advertises on social media in other countries that if you want de facto residency, you can go through them. But if you don't go through them, you'll have a bullet. And they find the bodies along the border. This is real, folks. And this is what's happening. I've seen it with my own eyes. Last month alone, I just wrote about it in my weekly column today. will be sent out tomorrow or over the weekend. If you're not on my newsletter, you should sign up for my newsletter. But February was the highest inflow of illegals in 22 years. Everyone's watching Ukraine, but this border crisis is still going on. We have terrorists that's been apprehended on the southern border. There's been people crossing from 75 plus different countries on the southern border. There aren't 75 countries Mexico south. They're flying in and they're crossing the southern border. I testified yesterday before the House Rules Committee against proxy voting. Okay? Proxy voting is a sham. You should show up to work, and I have never proxy voted, nor will I proxy vote, but Nancy Pelosi put this thing in place that you don't have to show up to vote. You just phone a friend that's a member of Congress. And one member of Congress can proxy vote for 10 people. So you really only need to pass legislation with 20 members of Congress, with each having 10 proxies. The definition of Congress means assembling together. We went through all the world wars, didn't proxy vote. The Capitol was burnt down, and we didn't proxy vote. We went through the Spanish flu in the 1920s and didn't proxy vote. We're strong. We can make it. We don't need to be proxy voting. So that's what I was testifying against. And I said we need to be focused on real issues, like the inflation crisis, the energy crisis, like 2 million illegal immigrants crossing the southern border. The chairman of the committee criticized me. You know why he criticized me? Because I offended him. Because I used the word illegal immigrant. He chastised me in the committee because I offended him. This woke environment, the fact illegal immigrant is in Webster's dictionary, and it means a foreign-born citizen who comes into a country without permission. That is what 2 million illegal immigrants have been along the southern border. This is the kind of craziness we have in Washington, D.C. And this is what we have to fight against every day. Folks, elections have consequences. We have to make sure we win, and we have to make sure that we don't get frustrated and don't vote. If you don't vote, we lose. And let me tell you, folks, our congressional district can change the outcome of elections statewide. Our congressional district ran up the scoreboard so far whenever Josh Hawley was running against Claire McCaskill that we offset Josh Hawley's losses in St. Louis and in Kansas City. Our congressional district elected Senator Hawley. Our congressional district can make sure the state of Missouri is always protected, always safe, but we have to show up, we have to vote. Yes. You all do that in Howell County, but let's do it with high numbers. Yes. Let's even do it with better. Get your friends out. Don't let them be discouraged. If you stay at home, they win. And these policies will stay in place. It's an honor and blessing to be your member of Congress. It's good to be your neighbor, not too far, up in Salem. Thank you for having me in Howell County, and I apologize. Well, actually, this is who I am, so I hope that you like it. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you very much, and thank you for your work that you do in D.C. and helping to protect the values of rural Missouri. We appreciate it. All right, Mary, elbow your husband and have him come forward. We're going to have an auction, folks.
Hey, Billy Sexton! Now, Travis gabbed me a while ago, but I didn't do it. He told me to start auctioneering more.